So everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to be in with us today. I see we have some new folks joining us, and so I will get to introductions here real quick. My name is Edgar Palacios. I'm the founder of the Latinx Education Collaborative, and we work on increasing representation of Latinx education professionals in K-12. I have my good friends and partners in purpose here, Cornell Ellis and Katina Taylor, and I'm gonna just kick it off to them for them to make some quick introductions. Katina, we'll start with you.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I am Katina Taylor. I am one of the co-conveners, co-founders of Elements of Education Kansas City, and we are an organization that supports, inspires, cultivates Black women educators, and I should say Black women in the field of education. So we support them as they work amongst one another and as we work with others. And so we are very clear about our mission and our goals. We meet quarterly. We're a little over a year old. We're just excited to be invited to participate.
Thanks for being here, Katina. Cornell?
Yeah, my name is Cornell Ellis. I'm the founder and executive director of BLOC, Brothers Liberating Our Communities, is an organization aimed at retaining and sustaining Black men in education. This organization is a couple years old. We meet bi-monthly, doing professional developments, networking events, and community engagement. So right now, I think that's where we're kind of focused, is community engagement and community facing and figuring out how COVID-19 has taken a little bit of a chunk out of our enthusiasm for education right now. Kind of trying to figure out, as the three of us are like education organizations, none of us technically are like in the classroom right now, because of what's going on. So I think me and Edgar were talking last week about how education organizations like mine and Katina and Edgar's kind of fit, and how we're going to find our niche and how we're going to creatively innovate solutions for this time. And I think this is kind of where this conversation kind of started from. I'm really happy to be in a Zoom space with all of you wonderful people. Just to kind of foster a conversation in an environment that's solutions based and creative around, what are we actually seeing and how are we going to start to move forward from here?
Yeah, thank you for that, Cornell. And a little bit of ground rules, since I'm getting used to learning how to communicate through Zoom. We have a chat that I can see, and so if you want to ask questions, if you don't feel like interrupting, feel free to communicate through chat. I will make sure to acknowledge your presence here. We currently have, I think, 11 people, including myself, Katina, and Cornell on the line. So I'm going to just shout out your first names. I apologize if I mispronounce them. We have Teresita, Liz, Isha, Dustin, Katina, Candy, Camilla, Ashley, Cornell, myself, and I may have missed somebody. I think somebody just dropped off. So anyways, welcome to today. Feel free also, if you want to jump in, we will best accommodate what we can. So as we're learning how to use Zoom and communicate effectively, here we are. Cornell, I saw that you posted online 3 kind of leading questions or exploratory questions around this topic. Do you want to kind of lead with your first one and kind of share with the group what you've been thinking about?
Yeah, so I put it in the group chat also so that everybody can kind of have a point to access it. But I just want to start with just like a moment of reflection around what are people's priorities right now, professionally and personally. What do you find yourself waking up in the morning, like really trying to get done? Or like, what are you finding important during this time?
I would love to bring Kim into the conversation. Oh, she just dropped off again. She may be having problems with her Wi-Fi, but I'll go ahead then and answer for myself. My priorities right now, professionally, are to support families that are homeschooling in the best way that I can. I am making sure that I am sharing with families at least 3 times a week some real tips, hints, tricks, hacks, as it relates to them homeschooling. This is, for some of our families, the first time that they've been with their kids in the space and time that we normally have them. And many of our families don't have devices, or they may not have internet connections. And so that may be very frustrating for them to think that they are not going to effectively or efficiently be able to keep up, because so many things have been given to them based off of an online presence. So what I'm conveying to them is that they can inventory their homes, they can find supplies that they already have there, and they can educate their children very well through body kinesthetic, creative activity, hands-on activities, things that they can do in their yard, outside around their house, so that they don't pull their hair out thinking that the only way that they can effectively educate their kids are using online tools.
Katina,
Kim,
I
you're
will
back
say,
on. Oh, I was gonna say Kim is back on. Kim, I would love for you to jump in and talk about what your priorities are right now, because you serve a very unique niche as it relates to students. Unmute yourself if you're talking, Kim. Maybe not. So someone else, go
Katina,
ahead.
I will say I appreciate your consistency as well. What you've been doing, just in your effort and vulnerability to communicate with parents and to make sure that they feel like they have a resource to be heard. I think that that is something that we are trying to figure out all as a community. But I appreciate your leadership in that. I'm gonna call out Teresita because she's like, I'm learning how to use Zoom and online video conferencing now before I have to use it with teams next week. And I think that that is a very real, like we have to learn the basics right now of what it looks like to be virtual in this day and age. My joke has been that, like, well, I'm learning myself, but I think Gen Z, the young folks have been doing this for a while. So it's my first opportunity to learn how to engage with the younger community for sure. And Teresita, I also, to your point, I want to be able to communicate weekly and continue learning with science students consistently. Absolutely. So how do we continue to communicate with the folks that we're serving, and the students that we're serving as well? Cornell, what were your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I was trying to share the video. Thoughts on the innovative learning?
Just in general on your first question.
Oh, okay, yeah. So on my priorities right now, I think that it's food insecurity. So like this is a real and present threat for our students. Like I think that a moment that I had to have with myself and with my colleagues was that right now academics didn't really feel that high on the list to me, as opposed to students getting meals and getting basic resources for themselves on a daily basis. So like that's kind of where I've been working and been thinking about on the forefront of for the last week or so. And I think that as the shelter in place starts to become a little bit more serious, we may have to start rethinking long-term solutions about how to get families and how to get kids the resources that they need at home. Does anybody have any like innovative solutions that are happening inside of their schools to kind of get students resources?
Hey, my name is Camelia, and as I told Katina and the rest of the ladies that were on the previous call before, I'm not actually an educator. Well, I guess I am. Before all this happened, my son was I already homeschooled my two kids, so it wasn't really much for me to get adjusted to. But what I do for my day job is I sell insurance, and one thing that the insurance company that I work for, Treasure Insurance, has been doing is providing food to widows and to children and to orphans. And so if anyone has a family that's in need, feel free to let us know, and we will definitely do our best to provide whatever we can to that family. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Camelia, appreciate you joining us all the way from California. This is one of the benefits, I think, of doing Zoom calls. I stated earlier in the week that I'm kind of excited by the prospect that one link can connect me to the rest of the world. And I've never felt more, I guess, connected to the global perspective than I do now. So appreciate you joining us, and I appreciate you kind of sharing that resource as well. Do we have any other educators on the line that are doing innovative things or working on how to address the basic needs of students outside of just academics in terms of technology, access to technology, access to food, or access to healthcare?
And I'm from Kansas City.
You are
Kansas
from
City,
Kansas City.
Missouri, not California.
Oh, got it. Well,
Good to see you. I know her. She's a former parent.
I also want to say for elements of education, because I'm all over the place, right? So, of course, what I'm doing for parents is one thing, but what I'm doing for educators is something entirely different. What Erica and I are doing. So, one of the things we realized as we talked was that people are asking about students and families, and those, are important people to be asking about, our demographics, our stakeholders. However, we need to be asking educators what they're feeling, what they're thinking. They're people too. And so they're still being asked to do a lot of work in a short amount of time and reboot the way in which they do and deliver education. And so we did a check-in with them last week to actually see how are you doing outside of the space of education as an individual woman who also may be homeschooling your own children or taking care of an elder family member or having to deal with your spouse who may be working inside and out, or maybe a single person that doesn't have any children or doesn't have a significant other. They're alone in this. So we asked those questions and did a check-in with those Black female educators to find out, how are you feeling? How are you doing? So that they know in the midst of all that's going on, they are not just educators. They are people too, and they should feel like someone cares about them. And so that's what we did on our check-in call last week. And so some of the people, when they came on, they were saying they were anxious or they were overwhelmed and those types of things. And by the time we got off of that call, that fellowship, that connecting allowed all of them on their way off that call to say that they felt better getting off the call than they did when they got on. So that's another thing that we're working on and one of our priorities as well.
thank you, Katina. Cornell, are you seeing any similarities within your group of folks as well?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to definitely what Katina was saying. Like, how did you just conduct this on a Zoom call? Was that you guys check in? Yeah. And like, I'm wondering, are schools also prioritizing their teachers and kind of doing the same thing, checking in with their teachers and talking to their teachers about how they're feeling, like socially and emotionally during this time? Because I'm starting to see more and more kind of like advertisements on TV, even they're like, we know that this time can be tough for a person that thrives on social interaction and a person that's an extrovert or a person that enjoys like being out and about, and how this time can be kind of a stress or a strain on those people. Do we think that schools are also kind of doing what Katina is talking about, like checking in with their teachers and checking in with their administrators to make sure they're just doing okay?
I would have to say, because I don't work directly with any schools, that I don't know. I would hope that they are talking to their staff about how they're feeling, what they're experiencing. I had educators from KCK on that call, from Raytown on that call, from Grandview on that call, some homeschool families from KCPS, and none of them mentioned that. It was all about getting the work done, getting the job done. So I hope as we kind of roll things out and kind of get accustomed to it, that they will at least do some check-ins. I will say Citizens of the World Charter School I know for sure one of their administrators, which just happens to be my co-convener, Erica, she was making daily calls to her entire staff to check in with them, not about the work, but just check in with them. So at least Citizens of the World is doing that. I'm not sure about any other schools or districts at this point.
Hi, Katina, this is Liz.
See y'all later.
And I know that
All right.
Kip is doing that.
Get back in the pool.
Awesome to hear. I'm glad to know the Kip is doing that work.
Yes, they've been checking in on their teachers. And also, I thought it was a great thing. All the teachers have been reaching out to see what platforms the parents have. And they've been reaching out, talking to the children, not even about work, but just how are they doing? Is there anything they need? They asked them if they need food, if they need anything. So I thought that was a great outreach for that school.
Awesome.
I participated in some online conferencing workshops that were held by my district, KCK, and at the beginning of each workshop, they had a check-in time where they were asking, like, how's everyone doing, and it's part of the introduction. So that's what's ongoing as part of those workshops.
I think that, thank you, Terry Cedar, for that, and Liz. I think it's also important for our organizations as well. We can't expect and rely on school districts to provide all of that emotional support. And so what I'm really pleased by, again, with Cornell and Katina, is the fact that they are actively reaching out to folks. I think what I struggle with trying to lead an organization and trying to adjust to this time is, how do I best reach everybody in the most efficient and convenient way, with also not being invasive, right? I've seen a lot of other organizations kind of maybe think it's the appropriate time to ask for money, and maybe their work isn't as essential as it might be during other times. And so what I really want to create is a space where people know that I'm here and our organization's here to support, but we also realize that there are other levels and other tiers of things that need to be handled and managed appropriately before we even get involved. And so there's a fine balance of, I think, of striking of, hey, we got you, but also we understand that, like, we may not be at the forefront or present of mind, top of mind right now. And that's okay too. So I don't know if you've seen any other examples of any other organizations that are doing really good about showing support, but not being too, I guess, invasive is the term that I'm using, but I'm sure there's a better term for that.
Yeah, Edgar, I'll put that in as that was the second question that I had kind of used as like a question that I was having for myself and for other people, was like, what adjustments have you seen your organization or your school make? And like, how is this kind of showing gaps or things that they're doing really well with the changes that are happening?
One thing I'll say is, I'm seeing, of course, a lot of people, a lot of schools, a lot of districts, they're working overtime to get devices and hotspots into the hands of our families. But we've known that the digital divide has existed for quite some time. And there are people that have received funding and, study money and all of these things to close that digital divide. And yet here we are scrambling. So that's very disconcerting to me. But at the same time, I feel that it will level the playing field for some of our families that have not had access to the resources like they should have had prior to this. I'm seeing some schools adjust and districts adjust really, really well. It's almost like they had a plan, or they were able to convene their tech folks, their teacher leaders, their administrators very, very quickly and work from what I would call a risk management or risk assessment point of view. And I know that's usually used in corporate setting, but I think it matters here as well. And they've been able to pivot really well. And I think that goes directly to good leadership. And so I've seen that. But again, then you talk about gaps, what's present in resources and practices. And I think that we still have a mindset. I've been on a couple of calls with educators, and I had to keep reminding them, because they talked about everything the parents and families wouldn't do, all the things that they didn't have access to. And so they wanted to fill every single gap that they assumed those families had. And so I constantly felt myself having to remind them, wait, we got to talk about how kids learn. And we got to talk about, are we making assumptions or do we have fact-based information that we can draw from? And that is a deficit mindset that consistently continues to exist, which is a gap that actually impacts everything else we do as it relates to our kids and families. And so we have to be very careful about making those assumptions and operating from a deficit mindset. I believe our families are assets and they have many of the resources they need to educate their own children, because historically we've had to do it anyway as Black and brown people. And I think that this will push us to redesign education to work well for all kids. And I don't know that we've been pushed to do that. We've had a lot of conversation about it, but have we really actively engaged in doing it? I don't think so.
Katina, I appreciate your reminder of, all the assumptions that we potentially can make, particularly if we haven't done the work, if we don't understand our own biases and what we're bringing to the table on a daily basis. And so a lot of the assumptions, since we are in, I wouldn't call it necessarily uncharted territory, but this is a new space for many of us. How are we relying on our own instincts, and how are those instincts, could they potentially be biased and kind of hurting what we're trying to accomplish versus helping support that? So I think that that's a really great call out. And I think I've been thinking a lot about, during a time like this, as if inequity wasn't already visible, here we are when we're looking at the conversations that we've had for years in the past around the digital divide, about access to nutritional food, about all these other things that play into the system. Now it's highly exacerbated because when we need, that safety network or that network of resources, it doesn't exist. And so how do we best support? And so nothing like a global pandemic to point out some or to reintroduce some inequities into the forefront of many people's mindsets.
Yeah.
I think we should acknowledge that can be incredibly triggering, and it could, there can be a lot of trauma associated with that as well. And so to your point about checking in with our educators and checking in with our community and the folks that we may not talk to necessarily on a daily basis, I think it's incredibly important that we actively reach out to folks, even though they may not be reaching out to us, because there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of folks may not be as adaptable as others. And so checking in with folks during this time and make sure that they have what they need in order for them to best provide supports for the students is crucial at the moment.
Absolutely.
Hey, Katina, could you talk more towards what you were saying earlier about like some of the alternative teaching things that you've seen? I know we have a couple of parents that are tuned in about, or like shout out some organizations that could give more information about like you were saying, like there's plenty of stuff in your house. There's plenty of stuff that you have readily available to you to teach your kids. You don't need, necessarily the computer and the websites. Can you talk more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, technology can be addicting. So we have to understand that long-term use can be addicting for our kids as well as us. Many of us are addicted, whether we want to admit that or not. I think it also has the ability, some students actually have done some project-based learning projects around the impact that it has on reshaping the brain. Because remember, these kids are in their formative years and their brains are growing and being impacted rapidly. So technology does not have to be the be all and end all. So when we think about 21st century learning, we're talking about creativity, problem solving, right? We're talking about communication, some of those things. And so how do you do that in this space? I'll give you an example. My grandsons are 5 and 3. And so if they're not at home, they're at their other grandmother's house. They've been going back and forth just to get out of the house. And she loves to garden. This grandmother does not have the green thumb. I was so excited when they called me and told me they had been out in the garden. They planted tomatoes, they planted corn, they planted onions, all of these things. And I was excited and told them, because that's what they told me they learned that day. And I told them I didn't have a green thumb. I didn't know how to garden. My grandkids could tell me start to finish what that process was. And they talked about the sunlight. They talked about water. They talked about planting in the soil and all of these things. That's science. That's math. These are hands-on activities that kids can do right at home and still be learning. We have to unbuckle ourselves from the traditional modes of what we've said education can be and what we've been pushed to believe, and start to deconstruct that. I told parents to pull out their Legos, their board games, their puzzles, any markers, any pencils, pens, crayons, whatever they had in their house. I took pictures of that and posted it. So if you go to Dreams KC, you'll see those videos. And we talked about a lot of different things as it related to literacy, and when I mean literacy, reading and writing, and then math literacy as well. We did a whole spiel on inventorying supplies at their homes, using Legos, using blocks, whatever it may be, to do hands-on body kinesthetic activities. And so, you know, you dream it, you can do it. And so those are some of those activities, some of those skill sets. Wednesday, we'll be talking about middle school doing project-based learning and how they can do that right now in this environment and not necessarily have to rely totally and completely on technology.
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a new parent, and so I mean it's a joy and a little bit of a struggle, right? Dealing with a 1-year-old like all day, every day. Like his daycare, they do all of the learning and the and the early childhood care. But even here, you know, like sticking him on a schedule and me sticking on the same schedule and working on his kinesthetics and working on walking and some of like this fit like stretching and a dance time and a songs time, right?
Yeah.
Like all of these things that you would like as educators, we hold very dear to us in our classrooms, right? Are all things that parents can take naturally, right? And kind of bring that into your daily routine. That can kind of help, you know, keep your kids busy and learning at the same time, right? And having fun, so that we're all like having a joyous time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And be okay with failing. Like as educators, as parents, like your day might not go as planned. And so that's one of the things that I've kept reiterating to families is be flexible, be malleable. If you plan this little lesson, just like educators, and it doesn't go well, oh well, it doesn't go well. I've talked to them about, you know, infusing martial arts, yoga, you know, working out, whatever that looks like in their family. When they get frustrated, back away so you don't kill that kid and that kid don't kill you in your sleep. Like back away and you know, say, hey, we're gonna regroup and get back to this. And so I'm excited really about Wednesday's video that I've already recorded it. I'll post it up on Wednesday because it's really talking about allowing our older kids to actually guide what happens in this space by their interests, what they're passionate about, what they are curious about, what problems they want to solve in the world, and not teaching to standards or to the things, the skills that the districts and the schools say that they do, but actually flipping that around and seeing how can their passions and things like that guide them, and then what standards and skills are they going to hit as they explore those things.
Yeah, Katina, I think that like one thing that you said that really stuck with me was the getting out of the mindset of what traditional teaching was for this opportunity in this time. And that's kind of like the third question that I had kind of framed this around, was this idea of a lot of people are seeing this as like a crisis, or they're having a hard time framing this in the positive mindset, right? Of this is an opportunity for us to break out of the traditional mold of what education looked like, which we know was not built for us in the first place, right? And figure out a way that we could reconstruct. And, you know, now that there's a crisis, everybody looking for the next new thing, right? And I think that as much as this is an unfortunate event, there is fortune to be found in it, right? And I wanna hear some more from everybody around, you know, how can we turn this into an opportunity for people of color, for innovative education organizations, for different ways for our kids to be able to learn the way they need to learn. You know, how can we take this disaster response and turn it into a real positive for our communities?
This is also a great time to like have families really like build that relationship with their students, especially in the world of education, because that was, you know, put a lot on the teacher before, but now that the parents are staying home and really focus on that learning with the kids, it's like now that partnership between parents, teachers, and students can be strengthened, because now a parent can easily go say, nope, this is my child's learning style, and give like examples of when this was like brought up and what they did to tackle it, really working in partnership and building that team community with their teachers.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Kim.
My name is, how's it going?
We're kind of losing you, Kim.
Oh boy, I'm sorry. I'm gonna turn that video off. Maybe that'll help.
No worries. And then you can also use the chat feature if you want to comment, and I can also help elevate that into the community space. Ish, I want to point out something when you talk about parents. I think that's really interesting. Do you think that the value of educators today is actually being understood by our community? Do you think that now that us as parents have had to take on these roles as teacher, as all these other things that teachers do on their daily basis, what do you think that the teacher conversations will look like moving forward around teacher pay, how we do parent engagement, how we best support our educator community?
I'm hoping that later on the conversations will be a lot more meaningful and a lot more understanding, because right now I feel like there's like this like it's very ambiguous. Like, what do teachers actually do in a day? I know that the kids learn, they come home with homework. I don't really know the specifics about it, but I know that this happens, and I think that's as far as it goes with like parents. But now that they're now undergoing this, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, now I can understand this a little bit more. There's more to this education thing. And now I can really be a partner with my teacher and maybe bring it more to the upper level. And hopefully that will get us a little boost in our pay, or at least some more respect, get more respect for what we do every day.
I appreciate that. I think I'm now thinking about like, how do we utilize what we learned during this time to help support teachers and make sure that our parents and our community doesn't forget the impact that teachers have every day on our students outside of, you know, just of what they do. And so I appreciate that. Hopefully there's a stronger connection that's happening or building between parents and teachers right now that will help us move education forward in those fronts. Anybody else have any comments? We want to create the space. We believe in equity and voice here. So if you want to say something but haven't had the opportunity to do so, now is your time. All right. Well, feel free to raise your hand or chat if you have any questions. Katina, I'm gonna kick it to you.
I think Candy was gonna go ahead and say something. She just unmuted herself.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just asking. Could you guys hear me? Okay, well, hello. First of all, I was listening to everything. I'm out here in California, and believe me, you guys, we have been struggling out here because it hit us really hard. And I'm not working currently, but I'm in the early childhood arena. And so as you guys are talking, I'm listening to that part about the parent engagement. And I was listening to Cornell when he's talking about he has a 1-year-old now and how he's trying to stay on schedule. Well, that's what we do out here. So the parents and the teachers are in contact with each other. They have a schedule, like a routine, to try to help each other. The good thing that we do out here, we have a lot of parent conferences. So depending on what program you're in, you kind of know where the kids are. We've created all these packages for the parent. We've had food days where parents can come and pick up food for their kids, because this is like something new. They're so used to their kids being in a program all day long. It's like, oh man, is it snack time? Is it lunchtime? So what happens in the early childhood arena, a lot of people look at us as babysitters. And now this is an opportunity that they're going to really look at, say, hey, they were actually doing more with my kids than I could actually think of. So we read, we sing, and we talk to the kids all day long. So now parents are learning to do that. And so hopefully this will give them a different perspective, and not just say my child is going to daycare, then my child is at the babysitter, but to realize that early childhood educators are just as important, and that the work that we do, because we have their kids at least 8 hours of the day working with them. Even though we're shut down, our Head Start program is still doing some visits with the parents, are dropping stuff off at the doors. We sort, as we say, DoorDash, just drop off the materials and leave. We are still practicing. It's really bad, you guys, that social distancing. Even when I went to the grocery store today, they had little signs on the floor how far you should be as you're in line to pay for your groceries. So it is a challenge. Our teachers that are in the regular school system are worried. They're trying to be creative and do stuff. They're trying to learn how to do the Zoom type thing in technology, because the kids are aware of it, but a lot of us aren't. So it's interesting to see what's happening back that way, to know that we're not in this struggle alone. So that's what I was going to add to it.
Thank you, Candy. I appreciate that. And I'll say this, Camelia, I'm so sorry that I thought you were in California, but Candy, you are in California. So we do have a national community here of folks that are willing to engage in this conversation, but thank you for your opinions. And absolutely, I know that I have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter myself. And I absolutely appreciate what the work of early childhood educators do, because it's for somebody who doesn't have the gift of educating, pre-K through 5th graders. It's bless you all.
It's challenging. Yeah.
But it's so much fun too. I mean, I think the opportunity is, I think about leadership development, and I'll plug this in. As we think about, a lot of our organizations deal with building the pipeline, either of educators, of educational leaders. And for me, the leadership starts in kindergarten. It starts in pre-kinder, right? And so when I think about this opportunity, is how do we elevate the voices of Black and Brown educators during this time to make sure that our voices are heard and that our voices are respected, as well as showing that, we can lead our communities out of this as well. And then we have our own innovative thoughts, and we have our own innovative ways of dealing with this. And so part of the reason that Cornell, Katina, and myself are creating spaces like this is to continue to elevate the voices of you all, and help support and amplify those conversations, because otherwise, like, we don't have to look externally for solutions. We actually have some genius here locally and within ourselves that we can know how to navigate these systems and environments in a better way.
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, I really love the fact that we have, I think Ashley Watts is also here out of Chicago too. So another Midwest, but like another big city kind of dealing with this national problem. Ashley, if you have any insights or reflections on how we've seen it handled in Chicago, I'd love to get your input.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I definitely think that when it comes to virtual learning, although it's very difficult and challenging, it is the future. So it's something that I think everybody has to find ways to adjust, even if it's just a little bit at a time. I know here in Chicago, we just announced that students within Chicago Public Schools will be experiencing online learning with their teachers, and it'll be at a maximum of 4 hours a day during the week. And so that is a start. It doesn't mean that all teachers will be successful. It also doesn't mean that it's going to start tomorrow. And the city is about to launch about 100,000 deliveries of computers in different hotspots. We're trying to mirror the mannerisms of our community colleges and larger universities as well. Earlier in the conversation, you all were talking about food insecurities. One of the things that the schools are doing, I don't know if you brought this up yet, but our schools are housing, they're still going to be delivering and sharing those lunches that students would have normally received, the breakfasts, the lunches that they would have normally received. So students and their families will still be able to drop by their respective neighborhood schools and get lunch or get breakfast or get lunch and breakfast. And our principals are actually being charged with facilitating that process, not necessarily handing out the lunches like literally, but being in the space, working with their lunchroom staff. And our food isn't always cooked here in Chicago. We have various companies that we work with to prepare meals for students. We're also working with the Chicago Food Depository, which is a huge organization to ensure that families who qualify for free or reduced lunches are still being able to access groceries in a timely manner. So canned goods and things like that that'll last long. So if you know of any resource, I think it all goes back to fundamentals, right? Before a student can learn, they have to have their basic needs met. And so when you think about that, it is a process of checking in, but when it comes to our principals, when it comes to certain administrators, it is very difficult to do that and do the work. So it's a bit, for me, I'm kind of coming at an angle. I'm not a teacher. I'm a director of teacher support. So I support teachers in implementing a curriculum for high school juniors and seniors who are interested in going to college or interested in picking up a different career field. So my focus is more on that side of the spectrum. But because I work in that space, I'm also very knowledgeable of what happens before a young person gets to that level. So when you think about like, what was your preschool experience like? What was your elementary, primary school experience like? And that involved a lot of snacks, that involved a lot of breaks, that involved nap time. And I think everybody just has to acclimate themselves for whatever works in their home. And that's assuming people are still able to actually be at home. I know a lot of families who are not at home with their young people because they are working essential jobs as supporters. And so making sure that we're not assuming what families are doing or are not doing, and just making sure that our messaging is clear for anybody coming from whatever angle or perspective, I think is important. But it is something that I'm not making a lot of expectations of my principals, the principals that I work with. I know that there's a lot on their plate because they are trying to disseminate devices. They are trying to disseminate messaging for parents who don't necessarily have television in their homes or don't have access to cellular devices, which is also a challenge in a major city like Chicago, unfortunately. And so just figuring out how do we figure out those fundamentals, because our public libraries have been shut down, which was also a hub for people, and navigating those alternatives with the families. So if you don't know the answer, be willing to take the question and be willing to say, I'm going to pass this question to someone else. I'm going to give them a time frame in which you're going to, respond. And mine is always, give me 5 days, and I'll have an answer for you. And for the most part, when I ask for 5 days, I have something for someone within a 24 or 48 hour time frame. So giving yourself that grace and that space to actually do the work and not do it alone, but, use your resources. So I'm excited to be on this call. I was actually kind of, I was like, oh man, I wish I had known about this sooner, because I would have reached out to some of my colleagues who are principals and who are assistant principals and are in the weeds and in the thick of it. And then some of my colleagues who are teachers and social support providers, as well as professors. I know people who are at that opposite side of the spectrum, where we're trying to get our young people to go, and they're helping young people figure out how to get home still. I still have students who are stuck in the state of California or stuck in the state of New York because they didn't have the means to leave, and their university, didn't think that they would have issues getting home. So still negotiating those kinds of allocations of resources for young people who might not necessarily have a home to come to when they get back to Chicago. So it is a very it is a very new world. I won't say it's uncharted. You know, I don't want to say that, but I do think that we are walking into a new zone of being, and it's important that we communicate. And so I just want to say that if you all are willing to jump on a call like this in the next week or so, I would love to be a part of the conversation again, and also to extend the invitation to other people that I know who will have valid and sound information to contribute to this fruitful community. So thank you for, letting me be here.
Ashley, thanks so much for your thoughts and for sharing your spirit. We appreciate the work that you're doing in Chicago. And I think that Cornell, Katina, and myself are committed to holding this space for as long as we can and for as long as it's feasible to do so, because we absolutely believe in the value of bringing people together and kind of walking through these things and showing community from this perspective. Even though we can't be together in person, I think that this is, maybe the next best thing. I will say in that spirit, we are getting close to the 6 o'clock hour. And so just want to be thoughtful about everybody's time. If you'd like to continue engaging with us in any specific way, I'd ask that you include your email address in the group chat. That way that our individual organizations can continue to speak with you and let you know what's coming up. And if we decide to host this again within a week or so, we can also give you a heads up. That way you're well aware. So as we're trying to innovate and ideate on new things and holding space, we're kind of front loading a lot of our conversations and creating calendars and consistent programming, so to speak, for our folks. So we want to make sure that you're a part of this if you're interested, and I will make sure to share the information that's on here with Katina and Cornell. So we are in the spirit of community. Katina, Cornell, any thoughts on what Ashley had to say?
She said so much. I would say I was kind of taking some notes as she was going. And so one of the things that stuck out was this notion of food insecurity and how we may see an additional shift. I just read today that Raytown and Tonganoxie, of course, those are surrounding areas to Kansas City, have had food workers who have tested positive for the virus. And so if that continues, then we have to think about and be innovative in our thinking as it relates to how we give food to families, if in fact we're going to continue to do that. So Cornell posed the question, like, where are the opportunities? That's one. Many of our families, or it's assumed that many of our families do not have a lot of reading materials that will be age appropriate for their kids. So I got on the phone with Turn the Page KC to see what they were doing. And my proposal was get the map of the little free libraries that exist. I know I have one in my yard, and there are a couple of others about 1 or 2 blocks away from me. Make sure that you're filling those libraries up so families can go out in their neighborhoods and find books or materials that they need. I also talked about partnerships. I said, contact the ice cream truck company, thinking about protecting the people that will be handing books and supplies out, but also the people that may come. Right now, we're not sure what summer is going to look like, but is there a way we can partner and revitalize or reintroduce, I may be older than most of you or some of you on the call, the bookmobile, and how that can operate as a mode to have things coming to the families right where they are while we're under the stay-at-home order. So I am excited about the level of innovation that I think is possible and that can be led by Black and Brown people. And the reason why I say this is because historically, we have had to figure out how to make a lot out of a little forever. And so when we're in situations like this, that's when our brain gets going. And so I believe that new leaders will emerge. And I won't even say new leaders, unrecognized leaders, unrecognized innovators and inventors will emerge from this situation if we just put our hats on and get to work and be positive and optimistic about how we can change or shift education for our children. I think it's ripe for it, and I'm excited about it. So.
Yeah, thank you, Katina. And I just want to echo that excitement. I think that, like Ashley said, I mean, I am going to call this uncharted territory. Like, literally, we're watching ourselves in a movie. You know, we don't know what this shelter in place is going to look like in 2 months. We don't know what the second wave of this is going to look like in September. There are a lot of unknowns right now. But one thing that we do know is, like what's been repeated several times here, is that the solutions are within our own communities, you know, and BLOC right now is working really hard to shift a lot of the ideas and a lot of the plans that we had towards some of the present needs, you know, because no organization is worth anything if they're not responding to the community's original needs and what they need right now, you know. So this food delivery is really, really big to me. As this shelter in place becomes more and more problematic, people aren't going to be able to leave to get food at distribution centers and at schools. So the ice cream trucks, the food trucks, the school buses, these are all going to have to serve as delivery and distribution centers for neighborhoods, for underserviced communities. So I want to continue having these conversations. Thank you so much for everybody who was here. I know there's a couple other people in Philadelphia and Texas that weren't able to make it this time, but you know, this is a national movement. This is a national problem that's going to require national solutions. And the more that we can get on calls like this and create spaces like this where geniuses can come up with innovative solutions, the better off we're going to be. So thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Edgar and Cornell and Katina, can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
Kim. Floor is
Okay,
yours.
this is Kim with the Transition Academy. I went and got my old laptop, and it's working way better than my new one. And it's kind of looking at me like, you left Big Daddy behind and got that new young thing, and now you're coming back with Big Daddy. And I'm like, okay, Big Daddy, come on through. But I wanted to share with you all the work that we're doing. We cannot forget about our families with disabilities. So one of the things that came to mind as this all took place was the only directives that we were receiving were about federal regulations, guidelines, compliance. And I kept saying, what about meeting families where they are? How do you become an overnight special ed teacher, an occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapist? And so took it upon myself to initiate Kansas City's special education virtual check-in. And we had over 30 participants. We're talking families, we're talking district and charter school participants. We had social services on the call. We had hospitals on the call. We had post-secondary partners on the call. And we all started sharing resources and said this was so refreshing to just come together, and can we keep this up? I realized the thing with our families is we've been living under a quarantine forever. The day your child gets that disability piece, you are pretty much, you're on your own. So we need to build community. And so thinking about what this will look like, we've launched, it's called Tuesday Talks. So every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., we will have Zoom conferences. I will be using Big Daddy. I'm not going back to that little young tenderoni. Big Daddy's gonna get me through this Corona foolishness. And so so tomorrow will be our first Tuesday Talks. The 10 a.m. session will be led by a African-American parent who is going to talk about parenting with grace during this quarantine. And she's going to share strategies for what's working for her. 6 p.m., we will have a teacher who will talk about teaching with grace and how she is working with families to encourage them to allow their children to mourn for their structured school days, and to kind of usher in this new life that they are forced into so abruptly. And so that will kick us off. We're also set for the entire month of April. We're going to have topics. We're going to have an occupational therapist who will share strategies for managing challenging behaviors at home. And so the first part, she will give 5 steps, and then she will give instructions for families on how to create their own home behavior plan. She will also coach up to 3 families to help them create their behavior plan. And then the following week, she and the families who she's coaching will report back on how implementing this behavior plan worked in their household. The next one, we're going to go a little deeper because so often we stick so close to the script. We are going to have a disability sexpert who is going to talk with our families on how to have the talk with your child with disabilities. He's going to explain how sexuality looks in disabilities, how it plays itself out, some of this disruptive behavior that gets in the way of learning and at home. He's going to explain that. And then he's going to give each parent a script. And they can customize the script so they can have the talk with their children. And he's going to take up to 3 families to coach on how to have the talk about sex with their children. And then the next week, he and those families are going to report back on the talk. So we have some, we're meeting our families and our stakeholders where we are, and we are going to use this time so that we can be united, we can be stronger, and we can come out of this better. And I would appreciate all of you all's support in promoting Tuesday Talks with your networks.
Thank you, Kim. Absolutely. We appreciate the work that you're doing. It sounds like you have some phenomenal and interesting topics and content coming up. So I also want to give a quick shout out because we have, where 3 or more are gathered, we have Surge family in this space. And so if you're not familiar with the Surge Institute, a shout out to them. They work on developing and supporting education leaders of color all across the country. And so I think we have a couple of folks, Katina, Kim, Ashley from Chicago, myself. So shout out to Surge. If you're, I will drop that link. I will say we are at 6:02, so I'm going to hand it over to Cornell and Katina to drop some final thoughts. But before we do that, if you want to continue to engage with us in any shape, way, or form, please go ahead and give us your contact information on the Zoom chat. I will be sharing that with Katina and Cornell and Kim. And if you have any additional resources or any additional information that you want to share to the entire group, feel free to put it there. I will make sure that you all receive it. So appreciate you being with us today and taking some time out of your busy calendar to join us with this. Katina, Cornell, handing it off to you.
I would just say that as Black and brown people, I think we are uniquely positioned to turn the world upside down. And I want us to be mindful of that. And that should be our end goal, no matter what space we work in education or outside of education. I think that we have to limit our intake of some of the things that are happening on the news and the media and all of that to stay focused. Set small goals for yourself, but really think about where you can innovate and where you can have impact as it directly relates to your strengths and your passions. And so I thought about lesson design. I thought about policy work and advocacy. I thought about ed tech. I think there is a way for all of us to emerge stronger, better, recognize, not that that's what we're going for, but we should be honored for what we do in our communities. And that just doesn't always happen. And so if your passion and your purpose is that you were built to be in a classroom, go for it. I know some people that's it. God put them on earth to do that very thing. But I know for others of us, we have unique gifts, skills, and talents that go beyond that. And so this may be an opportune time to kind of tap into those things and just go for it. Why not? So I'm just saying, stay encouraged, stay positive, take care of your own physical, mental health during this time, and understand that education is what you do. It is not who you are. And so you are a person first, a woman or a man first. And so take care of yourself before because if you don't, you won't even be equipped to take care of others. So I appreciate the time and the opportunity to share with you guys. And I look forward to being in community with you guys again at some point.
Thank you, Katina, for that. Cornell, any final thoughts? I see you doing a peace sign, so maybe there are no final thoughts from you all. Well, we're going to be here. I will talk to Katina and Cornell about continuing to hold this space and make sure that we can continue to communicate with you. Check out Kim's Tuesday Talks tomorrow at 10 and 6. That is Central Time. Is that correct, Kim? Because we have a national group of people here.
That is correct, Central Time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Katina and Cornell, if you want to just stay on for a couple of minutes, I just have a couple of questions and comments. And then everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording us live on Facebook now. So enjoy everyone's rest of your evening.
Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in.